Well, thank you, Tammy, and good morning. I'm very happy to open this panel, the second panel of this conference that is dedicated to the internal affairs of the kingdom. No doubt that during the recent years, Jordan is coping with a number of challenges, troubles, and hardships. Everything is going to this direction that force the king to maneuver between different factors, some of them belonging to the Palestinian population or Islamic opposition, even some of the liberal circles that unfortunately few, alongside the very harsh, dire economical crisis in the country and external threats, first of all and foremost, and we hear that more and more often during the recent years on the background of the war in Gaza, the increasing influence of Iran in the region. We hear about the encroaching of Shia militias and alongside of the lengthy border of Jordan and the smuggling contraband of munition and drugs, Captagon that arrives from Syria and floods the kingdom and the Gulf. The challenges are numerous, really, as I said. What we actually see on the background of the war in Gaza, there is also the unrest against Israel among the public and the support of Hamas and the protest, terrorist units, smuggling of weapons, and the terrorist attacks alongside the border as well. And furthermore, Jordan finds itself, I would say, on the geographic path of the drones that are launched towards Israel from Iraq and Iran. And by that, it becomes a player that found itself in this multi-arenal conflict with Israel. So in this panel, we'll be talking about the general scope of pressure implemented upon Jordan and the level of success of coping and the importance of this oxygen pipeline of the West, due to which Jordan doesn't collapse. For the benefit of this discussion, I wanted to invite the members of the panel to this stage. Assaf David. He's the head of the field of Israel and the Middle East and Leer Institute in Jerusalem. He is the founding father of the Regional Thinking Forum. He's an expert and teaching in the Hebrew University. Dr. Ofir Winter, he's a senior researcher of the regional department in INSS, and he is a writer of the book In the Name of Allah that had been published right recently on behalf of the Institute. And this book, by the way, part of it dedicated to a chapter that is focused on the disagreements between the monarchy in Jordan and the Muslim Brotherhood around the whole matter of peace with Israel. And Sima, the former head of the research department in Mossad and head of the Axis of Resistance in Iran in INC, Ambassador Mark Regev, he's a head of the Abba Eban Institute and Reichman University, and the former formality was ambassador in the UK and the advisor on foreign affairs to the Prime Minister. So thank you. Assaf, I would like to turn to you the question. So the first question is to you, and let's talk a little bit about demographic aspects very briefly. We talked about that in the previous panel. No doubt there is internal tension in the kingdom that's a result of the diversity of demographics. 40% of the population of this kingdom are Transjordanians, and they, I would say, the pillar upon which the king relies upon, or the supporters of the kingdom, but the majority of the population are Palestinians, and the king has to maneuver between the policy of peace and with Israel and the hostility towards Israel and the idea of being actually at peace with Israel. To your idea, the king sees Palestinian aspect as a threat upon the internal stability the way it's been considered in the past, and how can he establish his position with the different demographic groups in the kingdom? So let's start to mix up all the internal and external aspects, or shall we do it gradually? You can touch upon both of them. I feel that once in a few years I come here and I present the same pitch, really, just the same bit about the count of the Palestinians in Jordan. How many Palestinians are in Jordan, what kind of threats they are, and etc., etc. As Yaakov mentioned before, the question is who is Palestinian in Jordan is a very complicated matter. And I think that to continue and talk about the number of Palestinians in Jordan or the percentage of Palestinian Jordans out of the point of view of a threat as the main threat upon the stability of the monarchy and the kingdom is a mistake. I think since King Abdallah came to power, and even prior to that, when King Hussein was at power during his last years, the main riots were on the economical, social background, and they came from various groups of population that were loyal to the regime that in Israel are usually called Bedouins or tribes. I would rather call them Transjordanians. And after King Abdallah came to power, he chose a neoliberal economical policy that changed the map of loyalties and the social contract in Jordan itself. What kind of populations enjoy the economic agenda, what populations will be paying the price for economical policy, and the regime intends to move towards the economical functional existence or equality requires also infringement of interests, certain groups, and the social contract that exists between the Transjordanian population and the monarchy. In this sense, I don't think there is a point of talking about the number of Palestinians and how many Palestinians are in Jordan. We need to talk about the way the monarchy is managing the internal tensions in Transjordanian Palestinian populations in Jordan. And in this context, obviously, the Palestinian topic. Differently from the panel before, I'm not a diplomat, and we need to use occupation. It's not the Palestinian topic, it's not the Palestinian issue, there is an occupation. And differently from the Abraham Accords that was signed based on the ignoration of the Palestinian matter, and we saw where it brought us to, the ignoring the Palestinian matter. Peace agreements with Jordan and Egypt and Israel were signed based on understanding or a promise, a vague as it is, promise that one day the change will occur and Palestinians will gain a liberation from occupation, some kind of level of independence. The peace agreement was based on the idea of autonomy. With Jordan, it was already based on independent Palestinian state as a promise. As state of Israel, and I'm dedicating to that more time in the next part when we'll be talking about Israel, as further the state of Israel distancing itself from aspirations toward the end of occupation and creation of the independent Palestinian state, or independence to the Palestinian, or equality of rights to Palestinians, whatever you want to call it, the further Israel is moving from this path, it endangers and damages strategically the peace agreement with Jordan for a very simple reason, that the right has a vision, the right in the state of Israel has a vision. This vision is that Jordan is a Palestinian state. Jordanians understand that, they identify this vision much more than we do, really, and any expression of the parliament member from the Third Reich here is on the table of the Jordanian government, talking of the very fact that Jordan is not important enough, or there won't be Palestinian sovereignty between the river and the sea. Jordanians pay attention to that, and they play the strategy based on those declarations of third-rate parliament members in Israel. And it's a damage to Palestinian and Israeli and Jordanian agreement, and will turn Jordan to the conflict state, and we'll talk about that. Ofir, let's talk a little bit about the Muslim Brotherhood. There was quite a fascinating event during the last election that took place recently to the Jordanian parliament. The political arm of the movement of Muslim Brotherhood, the Front of the Islamic Action, became the largest party with a quarter of the seats. We never saw such an achievement in Jordan. Tell us a little bit about the status, the power, what in the kingdom, how exactly it changed, and the historical approach a little bit, how did it unfold during the years, and do they endanger the stability of the Hashemi monarchy? Well, thank you, Carmit. The Muslim Brotherhood was created in Egypt in 1928, and the Jordanian branch was created in 1945. So it's 80 years old, and I think I will not exaggerate if I'll say that at this particular point of time, we are in some kind of historical zenith, a peak in the status of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's not just the very fact that they managed to conquer a quarter of the Jordanian parliament seats, and they're the largest party in the parliament right now. But if you're looking at the outcome of the elections, there were national elections in Jordan where they received 41% of all the votes. I think it reflects much more the rate of support they enjoy among the Jordanian public. And if we'll rely upon the public surveys, public opinion surveys, you can see that they perceived very positively in the eyes of 50% of the public in Jordan. Sometimes it exceeds even 50%, and this is the support that crosses camps, in fact. Assaf mentioned the very fact that the Palestinian issue exists, but it's not just the Palestinians. In the past, they were identified with the Palestinians, but today, many of the leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood are Transjordanians, as Assaf mentioned. It's true that Jordanian government still has a majority in the parliament. They have a bloc, but the impact is quite limited. But you can definitely see more audacity and confidence in the way they behave, the Muslim Brotherhoods, after the results of the elections, and how they managed to achieve those achievements. Okay, the election law allowed them a more fair representation, the economical situation that is dire, the unemployment, 22% of unemployment, 40% among the young. We can mention the level of mobilization and organization and the way they managed to recruit voters and other parties. Maybe it just shows the weakness of the competing parties, but you need to mention the current war. It reminds a little bit of the Egyptian case. They were the first one to actually take over the public protests. Yeah, and many of the Jordanians in the eyes, the Islamic Front, which is the political arm of the Muslim Brotherhood, the last elections in September were a little bit of a referendum of the support of the idea of resistance, and people voted for Muslim Brotherhood. Did it because they appreciated the role of the Muslim Brotherhood during the war. Does it endanger the stability of the monarchy? Here I need to be very cautious, in fact. Obviously, we see more and more expressions on the Muslim Brotherhood part of willingness to call for a guerrilla outside the borders of the state, violent resistance, very harsh criticism mostly of the foreign policy of Jordanian government, especially in particular Palestinian Israeli context. From the other hand, if we're going back into history, the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, their movement that was part of the social context, that was part of Israeli politics for decades, in fact, until the peace agreement. There were even ministers on their behalf in the government. But the parties and the Muslim Brotherhood usually solve the problems through agreements and differently from the Egyptians. I would like to actually tell you that they learned the lesson from the Egyptian faction of Muslim Brotherhood that went towards some kind of revolutionary aspects. And they lost their presence. And if there is some kind of challenging factor that will undermining the order, it's not the Palestinians. Until the Black September, obviously, there were not the Iranians that Sima will be talking about, but they can have a very high level of polarity. Thank you, Ofir. Sima. So let's expand a little bit your outlook upon the regional aspect, and let's talk about the head of the snake.
And all the other animalistic names that we give Iran. There are those who will claim that in recent years, Iran is investing a lot of effort to unstabilize the kingdom and to render Jordan another impact front, another proxy in the region, and to incorporate it as part of its ring of fire. Of course, there's the geostrategic consideration, the long border that Jordan shares with Israel. And we see in reality that in the recent 2 years, the Jordanian border has become a center of the smuggling of ammunition to the West Bank. Is Jordan about to become a state in which the Iranian representatives could act without disruption? This is a considerate threat. How do you view it? Thank you, Carmit. Well, there's no doubt that if we look to the past, then the king has identified in the past the Iranian threat. He called it the main saw. And even before we began speaking like that, and he understood that Jordan's geographical location places it as a type of buffer zone between Israel, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. So it was clear that Jordan is a challenge in this respect, and that's as far as the king goes. And on the Iranian side, already in 2014, we hear Khamenei, the Iranian leader, saying that they need to help the Palestinian in the West Bank through Jordan. Now, what I would like to stress is that I don't think, as opposed to many articles that I have read, I don't think Iran wants to undermine the Jordanian regime. And actually, to the contrary, we've seen in the past year a visit of the Jordanian foreign minister in Iran and a reciprocal visit of the Iranian foreign minister in Jordan. So this should not calm us down, but Iran does not want to undermine the Jordanian regime. What it wants is that it views the Palestinian topic as the most vibrant and central active matter against Israel. And not for nothing, Iran has helped Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. We've seen Iran aiding the Hamas to execute terror attacks in Israel. For Iran, the fact that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is alive and kicking, it's an opportunity to exploit it from various directions. Just like Hamas wanted the West Bank to burn and everyone to join it, the Jordanians want to try to encourage those entities in Judea and Samaria that want to act, Hamas and Jihad Islamic entities. And Jordan has become a geographical region through which ammunition is transferred in various creative ways. We've seen even an unmanned aerial vehicle that flew from Iraq, Iran towards Israel and the West Bank in order to drop ammunition. It was intercepted, but what we see clearly is that the Iranians are employing crime throughout the world, not only in our region, smuggling of drugs and ammunition. It's using it to smuggle ammunition through Jordan to the West Bank. It's not directed against Jordan specifically, but also through Jordan. The second aspect that concerns the Iranians is the fact that Jordan is part of the regional defense system, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates. We'll leave that to the second panel. So I'll just conclude that Iran understands that Jordan is a weak link in the sense of super oversight, its proximity to Israel geographically, the fact that there are the Muslim brothers that are affiliated with the Hamas and are identified with the Islamic Jihad and others. And that is why there's an attempt to exploit that territory in order to transfer ammunition and perhaps also to use these people as terror agents against Israel. Thank you, Sima. Mark, we spoke about the internal challenges and the regional context. I would like to speak about the international context. Since the signing of the peace agreement, Jordan has received an American assistance of $1.7 billion on an annual basis. Some claim that without this aid, Jordan would have collapsed. So please explain how Jordan is a continuous asset for the West, and it's hard to avoid the timing of the coming elections in the U.S. Do you think that these elections are expected to impact the scope of the aid and the relationship? Well, it's not anything new. For decades, Jordan was the dear of the West empires, superpowers, England initially and later the U.S. We don't have to be Lawrence experts such as Yaakov. But the history of this kingdom has to do with the British Empire and Churchill's decisions after the World War I. And if we think about it, In the 30s and 40s, the Arab national movement split between those who were pro-British and others who pro-Axis. We know about Sadat and the Egyptian national movement and what it did in the course of the First World War. So the Jordanians and later the Iraqi, who was Hashemis, were pro-British. Now, in the Cold War, we see similar issues. Egypt, Syria and Syria supported the Soviets, and the Jordanians were the bastions of pro-Western kingdoms, and that is its asset. The Jordanians are on our side, the Western side. They're anti-communist, they're moderate, they're okay, they're pro-peace, pro-arrangement with Israel. They're weak, and all in all, they're the good guys, and that's how they were perceived. It's not like the relationship with Saudi Arabia that has oil. Jordan does not have oil. These relationships are based on a political benefit. When I became the Israeli ambassador in England, I read a book that I asked all my team to read. There's a book by Berman, a book about Thatcher and the Middle East. It's a great book, and I recommend it to those also who do not specialize on Jordan. And this book refers to Thatcher and the constraints that impacted her Middle Eastern policy. So, of course, there are political constraints, and her electorate was abundant in Jews. And of course, the American approach impacted Thatcher, as well as the famous Foreign Office, and each in their own domain. But according to Azriel, more than anyone else, Thatcher was influenced by King Hussein, who was dear to Britain, Thatcher, and the Western world, also in the US. If I'm to use a British expression, he boxed above his weight. So Jordan is not a rich country. It's not rich in oil. But the king, because of his character and experience, he had status. He would speak with Thatcher and convince her that his approach is the right approach. And the question that you're asking, the good question that you're asking, are the reasons that rendered Jordanians so important to the Anglo-Saxon Western superpowers in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Are they still relevant nowadays? And should Jordanian perhaps start thinking that they may lose the Western superpowers? So let's take a look at the world today. In the global conflict, we have on the one hand the US, NATO, and the West, and on the other hand, we have Russia, China, and Iran. Well, in the past, it was clear where Jordan stands. But where is Jordan nowadays? I'm asking a question. We could give it an answer, but the answer is less clear today. Regarding the peace process, why did Thatcher hug Hussein then? Because she saw Hussein as a figure that could promote stability and peace in the Middle East. Is this still relevant when we look at the data? Does Jordan today have a significance for the peace process? Some will say Trump ignored Jordan and he saw the chances to promote the peace process elsewhere. Now we have the bilateral aspect of things, the military collaboration, the intelligence collaboration, and the military bases that we know are still there. But we could still raise the question regarding the continued importance of Jordan for the West, and how does this impact conduct in Jordan? Let's just quickly put the spotlight on the manner in which the pressures that we've described impact the relationship with Israel. We'll have another panel that will be dedicated to the security difficulties with Israel. So, Assaf, we spoke about tensions on the side of Palestinians that were increased in the course of the war, the protests. To what extent does the Palestinian population impact the king's decisions regarding the relationship between Israel and Jordan that are anyway deteriorating? And what would you recommend decision makers in Israel to do in order to reduce these negative impacts? So when we're talking about external threats to Jordan, and there are quite a few of them, I would like to speak about the threat called the State of Israel. And as someone who has researched and studied for years the stability of the the monarchy in Jordan, I begin to identify similarities between the monarchy in Jordan and the consolidating autocratic regime in Israel. One of the marks and signs of an autocratic regime is that they want to determine the professional ranks and what they'll say, because if they cannot control the professional ranks, what is it worth? And what has characterized the relatively intact decision-making process after the peace process was a type of synergy and mutual strategic view between the political and professional ranks in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Ministry of Economics and elsewhere. All in all, there was a shared understanding of the strategic point of view. What has happened in recent years since the Netanyahu government in 2015, and particularly in the last 2 years of the judicial coup, is the dictates of the political ranks towards the security and professional ranks, which is completely based on a different strategy in terms of the Palestinians to negate the Palestinian sovereignty between the river and the sea, and the abolishment of a future solution to the Palestinian issue. We've seen this in Gaza. We've seen what it's brought about, the gaps between the professional and political ranks, the lack of decision-making. We've seen it in the West Bank, where amazingly the main interest of the security military ranks in the state of Israel is to maintain the PA alive and functioning and maintain a future hope for a Palestinian state based on a concern to Israel's future security interest, while the political rank is working against that. And we have here officers in uniform, and I believe others from the security institution. After the West Bank, Jordan will be next. Jordan will become the place to which the right policy concentrates, and the more the right continues to be autocratic in the state of Israel, you will carry the responsibility. If you do not raise the red flags and publish the documents that you are preparing, if you do not warn that this is the direction of things and the similarity between Palestine, if you do not threaten and warn that what's happening in Palestine and the West Bank will happen in Jordan, Jordan will become a conflict country, and you will be the ones to whom people will come asking for responsibility and question. The situation in which people continue to live under conquest is unsustainable. It will end how things have ended in Gaza. Thank you, Assaf. Ofir, we've heard about the Palestinian impact on the kingdom's policy. You've mentioned that not all the Muslim brotherhoods are Palestinians. How do they impact the future of the peace process? Is there scenarios in which pressures on the side of the Muslim Brotherhood will undermine this agreement? I'll connect to what Assaf said. Extremity on the one hand could feed and nurture extremity on the other hand. When we're talking about the ideology of the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan, it's not different than the ideology of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood towards Israel and the Hamas ideology. For them, the conflict is a religious conflict. It's unsolvable, but through the destruction of the state of Israel through a jihad war. It is forbidden to acknowledge the Jewish existence in Palestine, and it's prohibited to sign agreements with them. Article 11 in the Hamas treaty says that no king or emir may waiver a meter of the historical Palestinian land. And this article at least hints to King Hussein then. And when the peace agreement was signed, the Muslim brothers in Jordan declared a national day of grievance, of mourning. In the kingdom, they voted against the peace treaty in the parliament and became in opposition to the Jordanian parliament. And when King Hussein wanted to have initially a warm peace, they acted and have been acting since in order to undermine the notion of war, peace, and normalization with Israel. If King Hussein described the Jews initially as sons of Abraham, the Muslim brothers referred to the Jews according to selective surahs in the Quran as the descendants of pigs and dogs. And they even went against the water and gas agreements that are first and foremost on Jordanian interests, essential to the kingdom no less than to us, stating that they generate a dependency for the Zionist dependency in the Zionist enemy and enrich the occupation. I think that because of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Hashemite kingdom is ashamed by the collaboration with Israel and and aims to hide them. This is a radicalization and has been radicalized with expressed calls by the Muslim Brotherhood to cancel the treaty and the normalization process with Israel, aiming to render Jordan another arena of armed conflict. And this is what has led to the terror attack in the border checkpoint or passage. The Muslim brothers refer to these terrorists as heroes, and this connects to the confidence that they've gained recently and has enabled them to speak bluntly and directly against the kingdom and the Jordanian palace. And this joins the public opinion and places the regime in a complicated stance. On the one hand, they try to align with the people and to take a hostile rhetoric that has been noted, for example, by Foreign Minister Safadi, Queen Rania, and others, and to reduce normalization with Israel. On the other hand, the Jordanian palace wants to mark a red line. There were hundreds of arrests in the course of the war and also warnings that the Muslim Brotherhood should choose whether they're part of the Jordanian kingdom or not. I don't know what the king will do, but this conflict has been becoming more and more extreme. As a researcher here in the Institute, I ask myself time and again also what Oded would have said about the soccer result. Sima, I want to talk about the conflict between Israel and Iran that has not ended yet. And Jordan, where Jordan finds itself. Jordan has played an active part in the Israeli defense against the Iranian attack, and this has impacted the relationship between the two states. In the second attack, Jordan was more forceful in declaring that it will not enable action from its territory. How does this impact the relationship between the countries? Indeed, in the first round, Jordan played a significant part as part of the regional defense and also due to its geographic location. The Jordanians will not agree the breaching of the Jordanian sovereignty over its skies, its aerial territory. And Jordan will not enable unmanned aerial drones to pass through their territory, but they do enable Israel to make use of their aerial territory. Now, before the second Israeli attack, the Iranian foreign minister, who is no less active than his predecessor, has visited various capitals in the region, threatening various states in the Gulf, in Jordan, threatening them all not to enable the Israeli planes to pass in their aerial territory and to enable any use of their territory. And of course, this is impactful. And we must say clearly that these countries have stated that they will not enable the Israeli use of their territory. They have condemned the Israeli attack, although they're thrilled that Israel has attacked Iran, but they've condemned the attack as part of their relationship with Iran. We must remember, this is contrary to Iran's interests. In recent years, beginning with the previous President Raisi, who was killed in an aircraft accident, which is to improve relationship with neighboring countries. And indeed, we know that in recent years, the Iranian relationship with the Emirates and Saudi Arabia have been renewed. We've heard about Bahrain. There's a great effort on behalf of the Iranian to improve the relationship with Egypt. The Egyptians have been hesitant and they haven't renewed the formal relationship, but several visits have been already made with Egypt. Iran does not want conflict with these states, and behind closed doors, they tell these countries, don't allow Israel to use your territory. This is a significant question, and the question is whether there will be a third round and a more significant conflict between Israel and Iran. At the end of the day, geography has a say. The Iranians blame the Americans that allowed the Israelis to act from Iraq. And these countries on the way could have theoretically, geographically, strategically contributed. They cannot allow themselves, they're afraid of Iran. And I remind those who had forgotten that in September 2019, the Iranians did not hesitate to send unmanned air vehicles and missiles on the Saudi oil refineries and have paralyzed the Saudi oil production for several months. So all of these states fear Iran, but on the other hand, they're thrilled that Israel is acting against Iran and teaching it a lesson. It has not yet happened, but these states are in a dilemma between their interest versus Israel and their hatred, and more importantly, fear of Iran. And their fear of the conclusive power relations between Israel and Iran. Mark, we've noted the rhetoric, the Jordanian rhetoric of the foreign minister and the queen against Israel in the course of the war. Has the Jordanian conduct justified the credit it receives from the U.S. or the West?
Almost none of it, actually. And I am the last speaker before your lunch. And I would like to finish with something that is interesting. I started to work in Jordan, and I was just a beginner in Jordan department when Oded was an ambassador, and I finished my professional work as a diplomat with Jordan when I joined some kind of reservist service during this war. So you mentioned the interview of Queen Rania on 25th of October. So basically it was within first weeks after the massacre. She interviewed in English, not some kind of Palestinian channel. It was Christian Alampur that interviewed her. And it's not a spokesperson of the government, but how Barak Ravid responded to that, the journal.
Jordan hasn't condemned the Hamas attack on Israel.
Hasn't condemned.
And the murder of Israeli civilians. But now she goes even further to deny such slaughter of children ever happened.
So, personal temporary as at reservist service, I came back to help with the spokes efforts of the government, Christian Alampur, and then we saw Queen Rania on CNN, and we all said, what are we doing? How do we respond? How do we respond? What do we do? What do we do? And in the young Ataturks, mostly English speakers that came to help, they came, and it was like the advocacy system, she should come, she see the children, the slaughter and all, said, no, let's have a campaign against her on Twitter and the social media, etc. All those ideas of those young Ataturks that I call them, those young Turks, I call them like that. And I decided, without consulting anyone, we do not mess with the royal family of Jordan. That's just not smart. As a state of Israel, if you want to do it on a private level, of course you're allowed to do whatever you wish and relates to the state of Israel. But as a representative of the state of Israel, the governmental factors should not mess with the royal family. And they ask me why she said horrible things and etc. Yeah, but as far as the border is quiet and there is security cooperation, we do not meddle in. Again, you can give me a different answer, but was I correct not consulting anyone, just deciding to do that? Yeah, I think I was, really. Second, you can say, was it the right decision? Again, in light of her behavior and Jordanian behavior, do you think it was the right thing to do not to address this comment? Thank you for this very important point. I would like to thank you for very important matters you just highlighted here. I think if this morning you came with some kind of doubt concerning the tremendous importance of preservation of internal stability of Jordan and relationship between Israel and Jordan, I think hopefully this panel and next panels we expect furthermore will reinforce the need, and maybe will trickle down to the decision makers in Israel, the tremendous importance that this topic should bear, and we need to implement all the means to reinforce it. So thank you so much. So thank you, Carmit, and the members of the panel will return and reconvene at 1 o'clock. Bon appétit.